Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 524 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. We actually have another book that just came out a couple of days ago, so that one's fresh on Amazon. Just go and look it up. It's called From Letters to Leaders for the entire series, and book number 5 literally just got published last week. So really exciting stuff. We call all these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, public speaking has completely transformed my life in so many ways, but ultimately it's the best way to convey ideas to thousands and thousands of people and to bring about positive change in areas that you are uniquely qualified in. Everybody has that inside of them. And that's what makes public speaking such an important skill for today's college students to build, no matter what industry you want to go into. So let's talk a little bit more about it with our next guest. Jackie Bailey is the International Conversation Coach. She inspires clients to break their silence and become victorious over trauma. She is the founder of the Speak, Feed, Lead Project, a semi-finalist in the World Championship of Public Speaking. She is a TEDx speaker and a 6-time best-selling author of books ranging on topics from leadership, healing, communication, and even parenting. Jackie is an award-winning team builder, an educator, a leader, and a coach who has spoken for corporations, associations, and also nonprofit organizations. Welcome to the show, Jackie.
Thank you, Michael. It is delightful to be here.
I am so excited for you to be here. You know that I'm going to be starting to work on my own TEDx talk. So I'm looking forward to chatting more with you in the future on that and crafting that message, that idea worth spreading. So I'm super excited you're here. And we're talking about such an important topic in public speaking. But before we even get to any of that, I think that it's really interesting for our listeners to know a little bit more about your childhood and how we arrived here. And so we have to back it all the way up to your childhood where you were an abused child and you really had no voice at that point in your life. Now, today, you're helping others to find their own voice. So, what happened during your youth that was so formative?
Well, it is the reason that I do everything I do today. I was abused by a couple of family members and a family friend and was literally and figuratively told, don't tell anyone. And when you are the age of 8, 9, 10, and even into my formative adolescent years, that resonated with me in such a way that I didn't speak up. I stayed silent, and that actually kept me from understanding who I really was and to be able to see any potential that I might have as I got older. And it wasn't until I was a married woman with 2 children of my own when one of those abusers got married and had a child, and it was a little girl. And it was then I realized I can't stay silent anymore because there is another potential victim right there 24/7 with someone whom I know is a violent predator. And it was not an easy thing to just say, hey, guess what, guys? I mean, I spent several months in emotional turmoil trying to decide, am I able to do this? Because I don't know if all abuse victims feel this way, but there's this little part of me that always doubted that it actually happened. And it's because most of the time it took place in the middle of the night. And so it was always, was I just dreaming that? And if I was dreaming that, what a horrible person I am to dream something like that. And so there was this self-doubt of, what if I say something that's not true? And secondly, there was, well, what if it is true and no one believes me? And then the third part was, well, it's going to destroy my family by saying this. And I didn't want any of those to happen. And so suicide was something I thought about for quite a while, thinking it might just be easier to crawl under a rock and never have to worry about this at all. But because I had 2 children of my own, I started to realize, well, what if they end up in danger? What if through some weird twist of fate, they end up with this abuser of mine? And so I decided that I actually loved my kids more than I hated myself, and I started to break the silence. And it was the first time that I actually realized it was true and my voice could make a difference, because that little girl that motivated me to speak up in the first place was saved. It was brought to light, the dangerous situation she was in, and she was protected by other family members from that point on. And um, I literally saved her life and changed her life, and I began to heal because my voice was now helping me to get rid of everything I had held in. It was through my voice that the healing process began. So it was important to me to speak up, as it is for anyone with trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've done some work in education at the Sexual Assault Center, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. I think they opened their doors to survivors, I want to say in 1978 or 1979. And they have wonderful therapy there for people who are survivors of sexual assault. And there's all different forms of therapy. There's art therapy, there's like a gym with like punching bags and things like that. And there's all these different varieties. And so it was really interesting for me to read your story and then understand how public speaking actually helps you in the healing process. But I guess the question is like, when you're up on stage and you're talking about those things, are you reliving that trauma? Like, is that helpful to go through it again so many times?
That is a really interesting question. And I would say that early on, when I first began to speak about my childhood on stage,
Hmm.
there was a big part of me that would relive that emotion. And I think it's important to do that because you want the audience to have an emotional experience with you when you're speaking. And that doesn't happen unless you're actually feeling a little bit of what you experienced.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of speakers hesitate to talk about their trauma because they're afraid they're going to lose control of those emotions on
Right.
stage. And nobody
Right.
wants to be, ugly bawling in front of an audience.
Right.
And luckily, that never really happened for me. Because I started with small audiences and told my story often enough that I began to be able to control those emotions when they did come. And I would get to the point where there'd be a lump in my throat and I could feel it, but I was able to control it. And that was the most beautiful moment for the audience because they could feel the change in me and interpret it whatever was relevant to them in whatever way was relevant to them. But at the same time, I didn't lose control of it so that I could continue sharing my message. And that's an important part of being a speaker too, is you do need to go back to that place,
Mm.
but practice helps you to control it so that it doesn't overpower you in front of an audience.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I think that helps a lot of our listeners who are dealing with trauma. Certainly, I was hazed as a college student, and I talk about that on stage in specifics. And it does take me back to that time and what I was feeling and what I was thinking at that time because I was 18 years old. So I certainly can still put myself back into that place. And I think that really does get the audience to understand why I do what I do and why I take this so seriously in terms of the speaking and the research on hazing and all of that stuff. I mean, to a normal person, they're like, why are you so in deep on this phenomenon? And it's
Mm,
because it happened to me and I'm trying to
right.
understand it better, you know? So I totally get it. And I think that helps a lot of the people who are listening who are also dealing with trauma in their lives. A lot of the college students that I know, they're very nervous about public speaking. And there's that saying out there that, most people would rather die than be on stage. What advice would you give to help college students overcome stage fright?
Stage fright is really natural. It is our body saying, you're going into a dangerous territory, get run, whatever.
Mhm.
And until we start to speak and overcome the rapid heartbeat and the dry mouth and the sweaty palms and shaky knees, until we actually start to do that and work through it, then our brain is going to tell us it's dangerous. But most of the people I work with, and even I've experienced this myself, about a minute or two into that speech, I feel safe. In fact, I feel at home
Mhm.
on stage by sharing my message. So stage fright is something that you have to just get through momentarily, and it will take care of itself. It's hard to convince people of that until they experience it. But another part of that, there's actually two more parts to overcoming that fear of speaking. One, you have to know your message. And two, there's the mechanics of organizing your message, your experiences and stories into what is going to be inspiring to other people. So something for both right and left brain people is you need to know what your message is and have confidence that your experiences in story form are going to be the inspiring element of your message. But then how do you organize it so that it's not just a story, but there's a lesson for the audience and there's a takeaway for them as well. So both of those parts of it have to be in place. And that's what we do is we train people how to find their message. I talk with a lot of young people that are heading into college and they're part of the application process. And there's that dreaded question of, write this personal essay. And there's the question of, what have you learned in your life? And so many young people, I'd say most of them, have no clue
Mhm.
because they've never been given the option to freely speak about something that's important to them. It's always been, here's a topic, research it. You'll get graded on how well you report on what you've learned. They've never been told, hey, you could talk about anything you want to that's really important to you. And so that's a frightening question. And once they know the answer to that, once we can dive a little bit deep into what are some of these experiences you've had? Who was there? What was it like? What did you feel? And what did you learn from that? And what advice would you give yourself today to help yourself in the past to maybe prevent that or overcome it in a shorter period of time? And that advice that you give yourself is typically something that the audience will enjoy hearing as well. It's advice that's going to be relevant to them. So, and then once you know your message, it's is there an actual way to design a message that has all the elements necessary, like a good story plot?
Mhm.
There's different elements of a good story plot. Well, the same thing applies to a speech. Is there's certain elements of a good speech that gives the audience a pattern to follow because our brains love patterns.
Mhm.
And so when they see the pattern or don't even unconsciously see the pattern, they're still going to recognize it. This feels good to me. I'm
Mhm.
enjoying this. So
Mhm.
once those things are in place, the stage fright goes away because I think we all want to contribute to this planet. And our voice is a powerful way for us to do that. And once we identify how that contribution is going to be made, the fear is gone.
I love it. Great advice. A lot of the students listening, they would have, let's say, a presentation in a class, and that's usually only 5 or 10 minutes long. You're not talking about an hour-long presentation. So, what's your advice for creating a really clear and impactful message, especially if the students have a limited amount of time to present this?
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about something that is informational at most, but
Mhm.
then how can they make that informational speech a little more engaging with the audience? Is that
Right.
what you're
In a
asking?
short
Yeah.
amount of time. You probably only have
Yeah.
5 or 10 minutes to do it.
Yeah. I think because we have so much information at our fingertips today. It wasn't that way when I was their age, but it is today. It's hard to boil down what is most important with that information. So if you've got a 5-minute presentation to give, you can't focus on 10 steps.
Right.
2 or 3 is going to be at most what you can do. So that means you have, as a speaker, you need to identify what are the top 2 or 3 most important parts of this that I can teach this audience. So that's the first step. And the second step then is to add a personal experience or touch to that? How did this affect you? Because if it affected you a certain way, chances are it's going to affect some members of your audience as well. So find out how it's affected you, stick to 2 or 3 most important points, and then give the audience a gift, a takeaway that is relevant to them. That's what I would say in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. What if the people in the audience in your class have different interests or different backgrounds? Is there a way to make it engaging for a wide audience?
Absolutely. You have to find something about your audience that is common,
Okay.
and that's what you relate to when you're speaking. A lot of times we get to talk to that ideal audience. Like for me, it might be women survivors of trauma, right? That would be an
Hmm.
ideal audience for me to speak to because we have that in common. But when you're in a college class, as you say, and there's such diversity of the student body, you've got to find something that's in common. So if you're presenting it in front of a political science class, well, your points then need to be directed toward political science because that's what you all have in common. So it really is important to find the commonality of your audience and use language that they're going to understand as much as possible. That would
Hmm.
be my short piece of advice in regard to that.
That makes sense to me. One of the things that I've learned as a speaker is that when you come out on stage, if you're looking to build trust, something like holding your hands up like this so the audience members can actually see that there's
Yeah.
nothing in your hands, that's actually a way, a method of building trust. So, how can students use body language effectively in order to convey things like confidence and connection to their audience?
A lot of my young mentees or proteges want to speak with their hands in their pockets because it's a little bit of a protective method, right?
Yeah.
And it definitely shows that they're lacking confidence in that moment. So take your hands out of your pockets
Hmm.
and don't move your hands around so much, but concentrate on being purposeful in your movements. If there's no reason to be moving your hands, then don't move your hands. It's okay to have your hands still. If it's purposeful in your story to walk while telling a little bit about your experience, do that. If it doesn't have anything to do with it, there's nothing wrong with staying in place either. But most importantly is your facial expression. Even when you're speaking to a large audience, by using your facial expressions that match the words and the emotions that you're portraying, that alone is going to help you be congruent and in alignment with what you're saying and what they're seeing on the outside. So just focus, if nothing else, on your facial expressions. Watch yourself speak in the mirror when you're talking about the emotions that you're sharing and make sure that it looks like it's in alignment. If not, take a deep breath, get a little bit more comfortable with that to make sure that that natural part of you is coming out, and then use your body purposefully.
Beautiful. What about slides or props during the presentations? How can the students keep the visuals engaging without being too distracting?
We've all seen the death by PowerPoint,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where all that comes up is a whole bunch of text on slides. And you know what? If people can read the slides, they don't need you. So,
Mhm.
so slides are there only to enhance what you're saying, not to upstage the speaker. Use far more images than words on slides. And in fact, I've seen powerful use of slides when, say, you're giving a shocking statistic about something, and maybe you just have a number. You just have a number. Maybe it's a large number, 150 million or whatever, on a slide, and that is relevant to what you're saying. And by hearing you say it and seeing the number, that has a lot of impact to it. But if I were to show a slide that had all this information about how that number matches, people who have cancer or people who've gotten in car accidents or whatever it is, the power is gone because now they're reading it and they're not actually hearing. You're saying it loses a lot of impact. So if you're going to use slides, and I don't know that there's too many times when slides are absolutely necessary, but if they are, make them very simple, have way more images on there than text, and do not let them upstage you. So don't turn around and read your slides while you're
Mhm.
talking.
Mhm.
Know what they say without looking at them.
Yeah, that's great advice. I like that a lot. I agree with you completely. I think it should just be images. If you do have text, maybe it's like 5 or 6 words. I mean, that's
Exactly.
really about the max. And let those images tell the story. That helps to guide you to make sure that you're still on track with what is the key points that you want to bring across to your audience. And I think if you do that, you'll be very successful. But yeah, people are tempted to put too much words and then you lose the audience and then it was worthless. So stay away from that if you can. How important is storytelling in public speaking, and how can the students incorporate storytelling techniques into their presentations?
Storytelling is everything. You know, the point of talking in front of an audience is not to share what you know. It's just not. It really is to connect with your audience. And the only way to connect with your audience, well, not the only way, but one of the strongest ways to connect with your audience is a story.
Yeah.
A story that lets them know you've experienced what you're talking about and they get you and you get them and that you haven't always been perfect. A lot of speakers will get out and they'll just shout their praises and boast about all these great things they've done, climbing Mount Everest or whatever. But it's the stories where I didn't summit Mount Everest until the 6th time of trying. And this is what happened the 5 times before that. That's where it comes in powerful because people want to know that you have gone through a process to be successful because there's no way to be successful other than going through a process. So
Mhm.
when you're sharing that process with them, they identify their own processes and they go, okay, I'm motivated now to continue my process because he or she just told me that if I keep trying, I'm eventually going to summit that mountain, you know, metaphorically or whatever. And so being vulnerable with a story about your failures and then sharing with them how you found success despite those failures. That's what makes the great speakers.
Mhm. It's almost like counterintuitive. You think that you need to bring, your number one A game. Here's all my trophies. This is how great I am. But the reality is, if you want the audience to connect with you, you got to be vulnerable with them. You
Right.
got to share some weaknesses and how you were able to overcome those things. And that's not always easy for people to do. And it's very counterintuitive, but it really does work, I will tell you, as a
Yeah.
speaker.
Yeah.
So I think that is fantastic. Explain to our audience, how can college students leverage public speaking opportunities in order to network and build connections in their field that will ultimately lead to jobs and things like that?
That's a great question, Michael, because public speaking isn't just getting on a stage and talking to an audience. Public speaking it starts with one-on-one conversation. In fact, the best speakers I've seen are those who just converse with the audience when they're on stage. So there are tools and there are codes or rules, if you will, about how to have effective conversations one-on-one with people. And when you apply those on stage, now you're going to be a great speaker as well. So when it comes to networking, when it comes to making friends, when it comes to making those strong friendships and collaborative partnerships, having conversation skills that are effective, that's the key. When you can make eye contact with people, when you can use their name to address them, whether it's a name or a title, it's all on the same vein. When you do that, that brings instant honor and respect to that person. And when you have active listening skills where you're not just listening to hear the words, but you're actually listening to understand what they're
Mhm.
saying. And that includes replying to them in an effective way. So I teach my youngest students that are age 10 how to listen for very particular keywords that someone else is saying, and then find a couple of keywords you can use to repeat back to them in another question or another statement. What that does is it helps the person that is talking to you to know you just heard them, which we all want to be heard. We all want to be listened to. We all want to be understood. So that alone sets the stage for the building of a trustful relationship to begin. And then when you use those keywords back, then you make them the star. the fifth code I have actually for effective conversation is that it's not about you.
Mm.
Even when you're in an interview to get a job, it's really not about you. It's about how you're going to contribute to them. That's what they want to know. They really want to know, is this person going to make my workplace better? Is this person going to add to the success of my business or my organization or whatever it is? They really don't necessarily care as much about your experience as how your experience relates to their work environment. So remember, it's not about you. When you're having conversations with people, make the other person the star. Don't monopolize the person, but just to understand, show respect by making eye contact and using their name, and even a friendly handshake and a smile goes a long way.
You're so right. It's all about them. If you can get into a conversation with somebody in a networking situation and it's all about their business, all about their goals, and ultimately how you can help them achieve their own goals, that conversation is going to go so much better. That person will walk away from the conversation saying, you know what, that Jackie, she's very, very smart. The only reason why they're feeling that is because, people like to talk about themselves. They walk away with this
Yeah,
positive feeling about the conversation that we just had because you're talking about yourself, which is your favorite topic. So make it all about them in those networking conversations. If you can do that, then ultimately you're going to be very successful. And then, of course, you can showcase how your education or how your experience will ultimately help them achieve their
sure.
business goals. If you do that, magic happens. But again,
You
very
got it. Yeah.
counterintuitive, especially with college students who are young, trying to find their footing. They feel like they need to brag about all these great accomplishments in order to get the attention of a potential employer. But actually, the reverse is true. Just make it about that employer and you're going to do just fine.
Right. I mean, they've already got your resume. They know your accolades.
Right.
They want to now know how well you're going to engage with their customers, right? As the case
100%.
might be. Are you going to be the face that actually shows them in the better light,
Hmm.
right? And you said it really well, Michael, when you said it's about the experience you give them.
Right.
It's not necessarily how much you teach people, it's about how they feel when they're with you. That's how
100%.
you win friends. That's how you get jobs. That's how you succeed.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Very good. So, I do love good food. That's kind of my weakness here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. So, the next time that I end up in the Seattle area, where should I go for a great bite to eat?
Anywhere that serves seafood because salmon is the specialty in the Seattle area. We have a festival the 1st of October that's called Salmon Days, and it's where the salmon are swimming upstream to their original spawning streams and ponds, and we can watch them in any river around here. End their life essentially and begin a new life. And so the salmon is almost worshipped in Seattle. So finding great salmon is easy to do. The Space Needle is pretty iconic as far as what represents Seattle itself. So there is a restaurant on the top of the Space Needle that has a glass floor, and you can look out over the city, and then it also rotates 360 degrees while you're eating. I think it does it in 1 hour.
Mhm.
It goes 360 degrees. So you can see the entire city all around you plus below you, and you can have some great seafood in Seattle. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that's pretty iconic. I mean, come on, you
Yeah.
can't get any better than that. And you're right. If your answer was anything other than seafood in Seattle, then you're missing the boat. I don't know what to
Yeah,
tell you. I mean, it's
exactly.
about as fresh can be. And make sure you hit the fish market so you can see them throwing the fish around. That's always
Absolutely.
a good sight. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very jealous, by the way, because I live in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm landlocked and I can't get good seafood unless I'm flying out to where you're at. So
Right.
this is what
Yeah.
happens. All right. So if our listeners, if they want some coaching on their public speaking, or maybe they have their next TEDx idea worth spreading, where should they go in order to connect with you and improve their public speaking skills and maybe even get a TEDx opportunity?
Not even maybe. If they work with me, they will get a TEDx opportunity. There are so many TEDx organizers now who know that when they need a speaker, they call me
I love it.
because I put out the most eloquent speakers, and they are prepared and ready. Just a couple weeks ago, case in point, an organizer called me and said, someone just canceled and I need a speaker. Do you have any youth ready? And I happened to have a 14-year-old girl who had applied for 5 TEDx speeches already. She was all ready with her speech, and in a week she was on that stage.
Woo.
It happens, but you have to be ready. It came for her because she was prepared. So when
Yeah.
you work with me, we'll discuss what is your idea worth sharing, which is what TEDx's byline is, and what is the one problem that you personally have encountered in your life? Who does that relate to outside of yourself? And then what's the solution? How did you find the solution for yourself? That's basically a TEDx talk. And so it's most people have it in them, they just don't know it. So we discover it. And in the meantime, you'll likely get other opportunities to speak at summits and conferences, mental health conferences, moderating panels, whatever it is. There'll be other opportunities to speak from my broker. I broker stages for youth all the time. So while you're working on your TEDx talk and waiting for that stage to arrive for you, there'll be other opportunities to speak. So if you really want to speak, you're going to get in touch with me. And the easiest way is to go to JackieBailey360.com. So JackieBailey360.com. What you'll find there is videos of the youth who have been on TEDx stages because of my coaching. You can view them. You'll see my TEDx talk there, and you'll be able to contact me via text, phone, email, and see what our coaching packages look like and how there's one for you, no matter what your aspirations are.
I love it. All right. So hit it at JackieBailey360.com. Go to the website, check out Jackie's TEDx talk as well as some of the youth TEDx talks that you're going to see there, and contact her to improve your public speaking and get that TEDx opportunity. So exciting. I love what you do. And thank you so much for sharing all these helpful hints with our audience.
Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate the opportunity because you've given me another opportunity to share my voice. And Michael, what I've learned is in my healing journey, which is ongoing, every time I get to talk about my story, I heal a little bit more and I inspire someone else to start their own healing journey. So thank you for the
Oh,
opportunity.
that's amazing. So well said. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much. And to our listening audience, if you enjoyed this conversation with Jackie, I want you to like it and I want you to share it with other college students that also get the opportunity to share their idea worth spreading. So thank you so much for being here. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. We will see you then.